The
Wake up,
summer sun
please!
hung low over the apartment
Henry,
complex, painting
don't you
long
dare leave
shadows
me
across
here!
the cracked pavement of the parking lot. Heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves, distorting the air like a fever dream. The kind of afternoon that made everyone retreat indoors, seeking shelter from the relentless glare. Everyone except a 5-year-old girl with pigtails and pink sneakers. Willa skipped along the edge of the sidewalk, her rainbow hair ties catching the afternoon light with each bouncing step. She hummed a tune she had learned in kindergarten, something about sunshine and happiness, though she could not remember all the words anymore. Her small fingers traced the chain-link fence that separated the parking lot from the alley behind the building, feeling the warm metal beneath her touch. Inside the apartment, 3 floors up, her mother paced the kitchen with a phone pressed to her ear. Another important call, another deal that could not wait. Sutton's voice carried through the open window, sharp and professional, the voice of a woman who had built herself into something respectable, something safe. Willa had stopped asking her mother to play months ago. In the living room, Langford sat in his usual spot on the leather couch, his laptop balanced on his knees. He typed with the focused intensity of a man who measured his worth in quarterly reports and profit margins. When Willa had announced she was going outside to play, he had grunted something that might have been acknowledgement. He did not look up from his screen. Neither of them noticed when the front door clicked shut behind their daughter. They rarely did these days. Willa was not sad about it anymore. She had learned to make her own adventures, to find magic in the ordinary corners of the world that adults walked past without seeing. The crack in the sidewalk became a river she had to jump across. The weeds pushing through the concrete were a jungle she explored with the bravery of a famous adventurer. A butterfly with orange-tipped wings fluttered past her face, dancing on the warm air, currents rising from the pavement. Willa gasped with delight, her arms stretching out to catch something she never intended to hold. The butterfly drifted just out of reach, teasing her forward, leading her away from the safe perimeter of the apartment building. She followed without hesitation. The alley behind the building smelled different from anywhere else Willa knew. Not like her mother's flower garden, with its careful arrangement of roses and lavender. Not like the clean, air-conditioned sterility of their apartment. This smell was earthier, raw, tinged with the decay of forgotten things. Willa wrinkled her nose but did not turn back. The butterfly was still dancing ahead of her, and she was on an adventure now. The green dumpsters stood like giant metal boxes against the brick wall of the building, their lids half open in the afternoon heat. Flies buzzed in lazy circles, and somewhere nearby a cat yowled at an unseen rival. The butterfly fluttered higher, disappearing over the rim of the nearest dumpster. Willa stood on her tiptoes, stretching as tall as her small body would allow. She could not see over the edge. The butterfly was gone, swallowed by the metal belly of the container. She looked around, her 5-year-old mind already working on a solution. A stack of wooden pallets leaned against the opposite wall, forgotten by some delivery driver who never came back for them. With determination that would have impressed any adult watching, Willa dragged one of the lighter pallets across the cracked pavement, the wood scraping and catching on every imperfection in the concrete. She was small, but she was resourceful. The pallet wobbled beneath her feet as she climbed onto it, her tiny fingers gripping the hot metal edge of the dumpster. The smell was stronger here, almost overwhelming, but Willa had come too far to give up now. She pulled herself up just enough to peer over the rim, expecting to see nothing more exciting than garbage bags and discarded boxes. What she saw made her forget all about the butterfly. There, curled among the trash like a broken doll someone had thrown away, was a man. A big man with a scruffy beard that covered most of his face and tattoos that snaked down his arms in intricate patterns of black and faded color. He was not moving. His leather vest was torn at the shoulder, and there was something dark and wet on his side that made Willa's stomach feel funny. She had seen enough scraped knees to recognize blood when she saw it. This was much worse than a scraped knee. The man's eyes were closed, his face slack with unconsciousness. Or something worse. Willa did not know the difference, not really, but something deep in her chest told her this was bad. Really bad. The kind of bad that required grown-up help. But which grown-ups? Her mother was on her important call. Langford would not even look up from his laptop for her. The neighbors kept to themselves, locked behind doors that rarely opened for anyone. Willa thought about the butterfly, about how it had led her here to this exact spot at this exact moment. Maybe it was not an accident. Maybe she was supposed to find this man. Her teacher always said that nobody should be alone when they are hurt. The man stirred slightly, a low groan escaping his cracked lips. He was alive. That meant something. That meant there was still time. Willa took a deep breath, filling her small lungs with courage. Then she screamed. The sound echoed off the brick walls of the alley, bouncing between the buildings like a living thing. Willa screamed with everything she had, her voice cracking with the effort, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. She was scared, more scared than she had ever been, but she did not run away. She stayed perched on her wobbly pallet, one hand gripping the dumpster, the other reaching toward the unconscious stranger, as if she could somehow pull him to safety through sheer force of will. "Help," she cried, her voice raw and desperate. "Please, somebody help. There is a hurt man here. Please help." The afternoon seemed to hold its breath around her. The flies stopped buzzing. The distant traffic faded to silence. There was only Willa and the man in the dumpster and the terrible weight of a moment that would change everything. Footsteps, coming fast around the corner. An elderly woman in a neat gray dress appeared at the mouth of the alley, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel as she hurried toward the sound of screaming. She carried a worn leather purse clutched to her chest, and her silver hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Lines of a life well lived creased her dark face, and her eyes held the sharp clarity of someone who had seen too much of the world to be easily shocked. But she stopped short when she saw the scene before her. A small girl balanced precariously on a wooden pallet, crying over an unconscious man in a dumpster, a man covered in tattoos, a man wearing the colors of a motorcycle club. Opal had cleaned houses in this neighborhood for 37 years. She had seen plenty of trouble in her time, had learned to avoid the kinds of men who wore leather vests with patches sewn onto the back, had raised her own children to cross the street when they saw groups of bikers rolling through town. Every instinct told her to grab the child and run, to call the police and let them handle whatever this was, to protect herself from the violence that seemed to follow men like this wherever they went. But then she looked at the little girl, really looked at her, the tears streaming down those round cheeks, the way her small hand reached toward the injured stranger with genuine concern, the fierce determination in her young eyes, as if she had already decided that this man was worth saving and nothing in the world would convince her otherwise. Something stirred in Opal's heart, something she had not felt in a long time. "Please," the child called out, and Opal realized with a start that she knew this girl, had seen her playing alone in the parking lot on countless occasions, had noticed how her mother never seemed to watch from the window, how her father never came outside to play catch or push her on the swings. This was the lonely child from the big apartment, the one with the sad eyes and the bright pigtails. "Please, Opal," the girl said, using her name like they were old friends. "He is hurt. We need to help him." Opal set her purse on the ground and approached the dumpster. Her bones ached with every step, protesting the demands she was about to make of them. But she had spent her whole life helping others, cleaning their homes, cooking their meals, caring for their children when they were too busy or too tired or too important. It was too late to stop now. "Stand back, sweetheart," Opal said, her voice carrying the gentle authority of a grandmother. "Let me see how we can help him." She peered into the dumpster, fighting against the smell and her own rising fear. The man was breathing, his chest rising and falling in shallow, labored movements. Blood had soaked through his t-shirt on his left side, dark and spreading, though it did not seem to be bleeding as heavily now. He had been in a fight, that much was clear. Or an accident, maybe both. The torn leather vest suggested violence, but the way he was curled up suggested someone who had been running, hiding, trying to disappear into the trash and filth of the city. Opal pressed two fingers against his neck, feeling for the pulse beneath his skin. It was there, steady but weak, like a drum played by tired hands. "He is alive," she announced, more to herself than to the child. "But we need to get him out of there." She looked around the alley, her mind working through the practicalities of the situation. Her car was parked just around the corner, an old station wagon with faded blue paint that had seen better decades. If she could get him to the car, she could take him somewhere safe, somewhere she could clean his wound and decide what to do next. The police were not an option. Men like this, men with gang patches on their vests, they had complicated relationships with law enforcement. Sometimes they were the criminals. Sometimes they were running from worse criminals. Opal had learned long ago that the truth was rarely simple. And besides, there was something about this man, something she could not quite identify. A familiarity in the shape of his jaw beneath that thick beard. A recognition that tugged at the edges of her memory without fully revealing itself. "Sir," she said firmly, patting his cheek with her weathered palm. "Sir, can you hear me? We are going to help you, but we need you to help us, too." The man groaned again, his head turning slightly toward her voice. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment, revealing irises the color of deep water, clouded with pain and confusion. Where he started, but the word dissolved into another groan. "You are safe," Opal assured him, though she was not entirely certain that was true. "Can you move? Can you stand?" It took nearly 20 minutes to extract him from the dumpster. Opal's arms strained with the effort of supporting his weight as he half climbed, half fell over the edge of the container. The man was easily twice her size, his broad shoulders and thick arms suggesting a life of physical labor or physical violence. Perhaps both. Willa stayed close, bouncing anxiously on her toes, her small hands reaching up, as if she could somehow help bear the burden. She had stopped crying, but her face remained pale with worry. She did not show any fear of the stranger, not even when his tattooed arm brushed against her shoulder as he stumbled. "My car is just around the corner," Opal said, wrapping the man's arm over her shoulders. "Just lean on me. That is it. One step at a time." They made slow progress through the alley, the man's boots dragging against the pavement with each labored stride. His breathing came in ragged gasps, and occasionally he would mutter something unintelligible, words that made no sense strung together like broken prayers. Willa scooped up Opal's forgotten purse and followed them, clutching the worn leather bag to her chest like a treasure. Her pigtails had come loose on one side, the rainbow hair tie dangling near her ear, but she did not seem to notice. "Daddy," she said suddenly, her voice clear and confident in the afternoon heat. "Mommy says you are my daddy." Opal nearly lost her grip on the man in surprise. She looked down at Willa, then up at the stranger's half-hidden face. His features were obscured by that thick, tangled beard, but there was something familiar about his eyes. Something that made Opal's heart beat a little faster. "Sweetheart," she began, uncertain how to address such a strange claim. "I do not think he is," Willa interrupted with the unshakable certainty that only children possess. "Mommy has a picture of him. She keeps it in her special box. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks I am sleeping." They reached Opal's station wagon, its faded blue paint peeling in the afternoon sun. She fumbled with her keys, trying to keep the man upright with one arm while unlocking the back door with the other. The task seemed impossible until Willa stepped forward and opened the door herself, standing on her tiptoes to reach the handle. "Good girl," Opal breathed, guiding the injured stranger into the back seat. He slumped against the window, his head lolling to one side, consciousness slipping away again. But his fingers twitched slightly when Willa climbed in beside him, and something that might have been recognition flickered across his features. "Daddy," Willa said softly, patting his arm, with the gentleness of a child who understood fragility. "You are going to be okay." Opal slid behind the wheel, her hands shaking as she started the engine. The old station wagon coughed to life, its familiar rumble, providing a strange comfort in the case of the moment. She adjusted the rearview mirror to keep an eye on her passengers. The man had slumped unconscious against the window. Willa sat close to him, her small face full of concern, one hand resting on his leather vest as if she could keep him anchored to life through touch alone. "Mommy says you are my daddy," Willa repeated almost to herself. "She says you used to ride a big motorcycle." Opal's mind raced as she navigated through back streets, avoiding the main roads where they might attract attention. What had she gotten herself into? The man could be dangerous. His appearance certainly suggested as much. But there was something about Willa's certainty and the way she showed absolutely no fear of him. The man stirred as they turned onto Opal Street, his eyes fluttering open to reveal those deep blue irises once again. Confusion clouded his features as he took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The old car, the elderly woman at the wheel, the little girl pressed against his side. "Where am I?" He managed, his voice rough as gravel scraping stone. Before Opal could respond, Willa's voice piped up from beside him. "Mommy says you are my daddy." The man's eyes widened slightly, focusing on Willa's face for the first time. His cracked lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Something shifted in his expression, confusion giving way to something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. Then his head fell back against the seat, and consciousness slipped away once more. Opal pulled into her driveway, her small cottage sitting quietly at the end of a tree-lined street. The garden she tended each morning bloomed with late summer flowers, their colors vibrant against the white picket fence. It was a peaceful place, a safe place, though she suspected peace and safety were about to become distant memories. Inside, she guided the man to her floral-patterned couch, the effort straining every muscle in her aging body. He was heavier than he looked, which was saying something, given how large he already appeared. His leather vest scraped against the delicate fabric of her furniture, leaving dark smudges that she would worry about later. Willa stood nearby, watching with wide eyes as Opal began assessing the stranger's wounds. The blood on his side came from a deep gash, the kind that might have been caused by a knife or a piece of broken metal. It needed cleaning and stitching, proper medical attention that Opal could not provide. But she did what she could. For the next hour, she worked with the supplies she kept in her bathroom cabinet: antiseptic and gauze, medical tape and painkillers left over from her hip surgery 3 years ago. The man drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes groaning when she touched a particularly tender spot, sometimes muttering words that made no sense. Willa helped in her own way, fetching water when Opal asked, holding bandages while Opal taped them in place. The child showed no squeamishness at the sight of blood, no hesitation when asked to touch the injured stranger. She worked alongside Opal with a focus that seemed far beyond her 5 years. By the time Opal finished late afternoon, light had begun to slant through her lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across the room. The man slept fitfully on her couch, his breathing more even now, color slowly returning to his weathered face. Opal sank into her armchair, exhaustion settling into her bones. She needed to call someone. The child's mother, at least. Someone needed to know where Willa was. As if reading her thoughts, Willa looked up from her spot on the floor beside the couch. "You should call my mommy," she said matter-of-factly. "She will want to see him." The conviction in the child's voice sent a chill down Opal's spine. Whatever was about to unfold, she had a feeling it would be far more complicated than a simple reunion. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for the apartment complex, asking to be connected to the unit where the child's mother lived. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, sharp and professional. "Hello, this is Sutton." Ma'am. Opal began choosing her words carefully. "My name is Opal. I work as a housekeeper in your neighborhood. I have your daughter here with me, and there is something you need to see." Sutton's hands trembled as she fumbled with her car keys, nearly dropping them on the driveway of the apartment complex. The phone call from Opal still echoed in her ears, fragmentary and strange. Her daughter had found someone hurt. They had taken him to Opal's house. The logical part of her brain, the part that had built a successful career and a respectable life, told her to call the police, to let the authorities handle whatever situation Willa had stumbled into. Children did not find injured strangers. That was not how the world worked. But something in Opal's voice had given her pause, a hesitation, a careful choosing of words that suggested there was more to the story than a simple accident. And then there was Willa herself. Sutton's daughter had a habit of seeing things that adults missed, of making connections that should have been impossible for a child her age. When Willa said something with conviction, Sutton had learned to pay attention. She drove too fast through the quiet streets, her designer handbag forgotten on the passenger seat, her manicured nails digging into the leather of the steering wheel. The carefully curated calm she wore like armor began to crack, letting in the old fears she had buried so deep. Fears of the past reaching out to grab her. Fears of the life she had left behind. Fears of the man she had tried so hard to forget. Opal's cottage came into view, its cheerful flowers and white picket fence, a stark contrast to the panic building in Sutton's chest. She barely remembered to put the car in park before throwing open her door, her heels clicking rapidly against the concrete path. Her hand was raised to knock when she heard Willa's voice through the screen door. "Look, Opal made cookies. Want one, Daddy?" The word hit Sutton like a physical blow. Daddy. Willa was calling someone Daddy. She pushed open the screen door, its familiar creak announcing her presence. The living room stretched before her, small and tidy, decorated with family photos and handmade quilts. The afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains, making dust motes dance in the golden light. And there, lying on Opal's floral couch, was a ghost. He was older now. The beard was thicker, touched with gray at the edges. New lines creased the corners of his eyes, telling stories of hard years she knew nothing about. His leather vest was torn and bloodstained. His tattooed arms stretched across the arm of the couch like he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. But those eyes, she would have recognized those eyes anywhere. Deep blue like the ocean at midnight. Eyes that had looked at her once with such love that she thought she might drown in them. Eyes that had haunted her dreams for 5 years, appearing in moments of weakness, reminding her of everything she had lost, everything she had tried to forget. The room seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing inward as the past collided with the present. She could not breathe, could not think, could only stare at the man on the couch, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were showing her. He stirred slightly as if sensing her presence. His head turned toward the door, those impossible eyes finding hers across the length of the small room. Recognition flickered in their depths. Confusion followed, then something that looked almost like pain. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with years of silence and questions that had never been answered. Sutton's hand gripped the door frame, her knuckles white with the effort of staying upright. Mommy Willa said, appearing at her side with a half-eaten cookie in her hand, "I found him. I found Daddy." The world tilted beneath Sutton's feet. Briggs, she whispered, the name foreign yet familiar on her tongue. A name she had not spoken aloud in 5 years. A name that tasted like summer nights and rebellion like freedom and heartbreak all wrapped into one. Sutton. Briggs murmured the name, his voice rough with confusion. The word came to him from somewhere deep in his fractured memory. He was not certain how he knew it, but he knew it was right. His brow furrowed, those blue eyes clouding with frustration. She could see him struggling, reaching for memories that seemed to slip through his fingers like water through a sieve. "You look," he started, then trailed off, unable to find the words. "Different. It has been a long time," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "5 years, Briggs. You have been gone for 5 years." The number seemed to strike him physically. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers to his temples as if trying to force his brain to cooperate. Opal bustled in from the kitchen, her presence a grounding force in the charged atmosphere. She set a cup of tea on the side table near Sutton, her weathered hands moving with practiced calm. "He has been in and out of consciousness since we brought him here," Opal explained quietly. "His wound is not life-threatening, but he is weak. And there is something else." She hesitated, her eyes moving between Sutton and the man on the couch. "His memory seems fragmented." "There are gaps." Sutton's heart clenched. Gaps. Such a small word to describe the enormous void that had opened in her life when Briggs disappeared. "Do you remember me?" she asked, stepping closer to the couch. "Do you remember us?" Briggs looked at her with those troubled blue eyes. His hand rose slightly, reaching toward her before falling back to his side. "Pieces," he admitted. "I remember your laugh, the way you used to wear your hair long and wild." He swallowed hard. "I remember how you made me feel. Like maybe I could be something more than what I was." "But the details," he shook his head slowly. "There was an accident, my bike. 3 years ago, maybe 4. I hit my head. Things have not been clear since then." Sutton felt the room spin around her. He had been hurt. Alone somewhere, hurt and lost while she was building her new life. While she was raising their daughter without him. Their daughter. The thought struck her with sudden, terrible clarity. She looked at Willa, who had settled on the floor beside the couch, her small hand resting on Briggs's arm, as if she had known him her whole life. The timing had always been there, buried beneath layers of denial and willful ignorance. Briggs had disappeared almost exactly 9 months before Willa was born. Sutton had told herself it was a coincidence, had convinced herself that Langford, who she had married 6 months into her pregnancy, was the only father Willa would ever need. But looking at them now side by side, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The shape of Willa's jaw, the particular blue of her eyes, the stubborn set of her chin when she made up her mind about something. "Mommy says you are my daddy," Willa announced again, seemingly unbothered by the tension in the room. "She has a picture of you. You had a motorcycle." Briggs stared at the child, his expression shifting from confusion to something deeper. Something that looked almost like wonder. "I have a daughter," he said slowly, testing the words like they might shatter if he spoke them too loudly. His eyes moved to Sutton, seeking confirmation. "We have a daughter," Sutton could not answer. Her throat had closed around the words, choking them before they could escape. All the careful walls she had built, all the stories she had told herself about moving on and starting fresh, they crumbled in the face of this moment. She needed time. Time to think, to process, to figure out what this meant for her life and for Willa's. I need to make some calls, she said, her voice distant even to her own ears. We will talk more when you are stronger. She retreated to Opal's small kitchen, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. The first call went to her office, a brief explanation that she would be unavailable for the rest of the day. The second call required more courage than she thought she possessed. Hello, I need to speak with Jack Thompson. Yes, the private investigator. Tell him it is urgent. While Sutton made her calls, Opal kept watch over her unusual patient. Briggs drifted in and out of sleep, his body demanding rest, while his mind struggled to make sense of everything that had happened. Willa refused to leave his side. She sat on the floor near the couch, her coloring book spread out around her like a protective circle. Every few minutes she would look up from her drawing to check on Briggs, as if making sure he was still there, still real. When he woke again, she was ready with questions. Do you like butterflies, she asked, holding up her drawing of a brightly colored insect. I followed one, and that is how I found you. Briggs pushed himself up slightly, wincing at the pull of his bandaged wound. His eyes focused on the drawing, then on the girl who had made it. It is beautiful, he said, his voice rough but sincere. You are a good artist. Willa beamed with pride. Mommy says I get it from someone. She never says who, but I think maybe it is you. The simple logic of a child cutting through years of secrets and silences. Briggs felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he could not name, but recognized instinctively. Connection. Belonging. The sense that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Tell me about yourself, he said, genuinely curious. What do you like besides butterflies? And drawing, Willa considered the question as seriously, her small face scrunching in thought. I like climbing trees, she said finally, and looking at clouds. They make shapes if you watch long enough. And I like when it rains because everything smells clean after. She paused, then added quietly, I do not like when Mommy is too busy to play, or when Langford tells me to be quiet. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Briggs's expression shifted, confusion giving way to concern. Who is Langford? He is Mommy's husband, Willa explained, her voice matter of fact. He works all the time and does not like when I am loud, but he is not my real daddy. Mommy said my real daddy had to go away because he was fixing something important. Briggs felt the weight of that information settle over him. The woman he remembered, the one with the wild hair and the reckless laugh, she had married someone else, had built a life without him, had told their daughter stories about a father who disappeared, but she had kept his picture, had looked at it in secret moments when she thought no one was watching. What else did your mommy tell you about your real daddy, Briggs asked carefully. Willa's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of a child sharing her favorite story. She said you used to make her laugh all the time, and you saved a puppy once from some bad men. And you rode a big motorcycle that was the loudest thing she ever heard. She lowered her voice conspiratorially, and she said you had to go away to keep us safe, but she never stopped loving you. The words hit Briggs like physical blows, each one stirring something deep in the fog of his memory. He had saved a puppy. He could not remember that. Could not remember leaving to keep anyone safe. But the idea of it, the intention behind it that felt true somehow. He reached out tentatively, his large hand hovering over Willa's head before gently patting her hair. I wish I could remember, he said honestly. I wish I could remember everything. It is okay, Willa said with the easy forgiveness that only children possess. You can make new memories now. Better ones. In the kitchen, Sutton finished her call with the private investigator and pressed her back against the wall, struggling to steady her breathing. Jack Thompson had promised to dig into Briggs's past to find out what had happened in the 5 years since he disappeared, where he had been, what he had done, why he had left. The questions burned in her mind like hot coals. She had spent 5 years convincing herself that Briggs had chosen to leave, that his disappearance was abandonment, plain and simple. It had been easier that way, easier to hate him than to wonder if something terrible had happened. But now he was here, confused and wounded, with gaps in his memory that suggested a story far more complicated than she had imagined. And their daughter, the daughter she had never told him about, was sitting beside him like he was the answer to every prayer she had ever whispered. Sutton thought about her life with Langford, the beautiful apartment, the financial security, the social standing that came with being married to a successful businessman. And then she thought about how empty all of it felt, How she caught herself staring at Briggs's photograph late at night, wondering about the road not taken. How she watched Willa play alone while Langford typed on his laptop, too absorbed in his work to notice his stepdaughter existed. How she had stopped laughing years ago and barely noticed the silence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Langford. "Where are you, Wilson? Dinner at 7. Do not be late." Sutton stared at the message, feeling the familiar weight of obligation pressing down on her shoulders. The life she had built was a cage, beautiful and comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. She typed back a response. "Something came up with Willa. I will explain later." It was not enough information, she knew that. Langford would be furious, would demand answers when she got home. But right now, she could not bring herself to care about dinner parties and social obligations. Not when her past had literally risen from the dead. The evening light had begun to fade by the time Sutton returned to Opal's living room. Briggs was awake again, sitting upright on the couch with a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked stronger than before, though pain still shadowed his features. Willa had fallen asleep on the floor beside him, her head resting on a pillow. Opal had provided her small hand, still reaching toward the stranger she had claimed as her father. "We need to talk," Sutton said, settling into the armchair across from him. "Really talk." Briggs nodded, setting down his coffee. His eyes moved to the sleeping child, something soft entering his expression. "She is amazing," he said quietly. "However you raised her, you did a good job." "I had help," Sutton admitted, though the words tasted bitter. "Langford, my husband, he provided." She paused, searching for the right word. Stability, but not love. It was not a question. Briggs could read it in the tension of her shoulders, the careful way she held herself as if she might shatter at the slightest touch. "He loves the idea of a family," Sutton said carefully. "The image of it. He loves being seen as a successful man with a beautiful wife and a perfect daughter. But the actual work of loving us," she shook her head, "that has never been his priority." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with years of disappointment. "I hired someone." Sutton continued, changing the subject before she said something she could not take back. "A private investigator. I need to know what happened to you, Briggs. Where you were for 5 years, why you left." She met his eyes directly. "I need to know if Willa is really yours." The question did not seem to surprise him. He looked at the sleeping girl, studying her features in the soft lamplight. "She has my eyes," he said finally. "I can see that even without a mirror. And something about the way she tilts her head when she is listening. That is familiar too." He paused. "But I understand why you need proof. 5 years is a long time. A lot can happen." "A lot did happen," Sutton said quietly. "I got married, built a career, raised a daughter who asked about her father every night for 3 years before she finally stopped asking." She felt tears prickling at her eyes. "I told her you were fixing something important, that you would come back if you could. I did not know what else to say." Briggs's jaw tightened. The pain in his eyes was not from his wound. "I wish I could tell you what happened," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I wish I could explain why I left what I was thinking, where I have been. But it is all fog, faces without names, places without context. I know I was part of a motorcycle club, the Iron Wolves. I know I did things I am not proud of. But the specific memories," he shook his head in frustration, "they slip away every time I try to grab them." "The Iron Wolves?" Sutton repeated the name, stirring something in her own memory. "You were with them when we met. You said you were going to leave, said you wanted a different life." "Did I leave them?" "The investigator will find out." They sat in silence for a moment. Two people who had once meant everything to each other, now separated by years and questions in the vast gulf of what might have been. "The timing," Sutton said, finally forcing herself to voice what they were both thinking. "You disappeared almost exactly 5 years ago, 8 months before Willa was born." She swallowed hard. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you vanished." Briggs closed his eyes, absorbing the implications. When he opened them again, they glistened with unshed tears. "You went through that alone," he said. "The pregnancy, the birth, everything after. You did it all alone." "I had to," Sutton replied, her voice cracking slightly. "You were gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. One day we were planning a future, and the next you had vanished like you never existed. What was I supposed to do?" He had no answer for that. What answer could there possibly be? "I am sorry," he said finally. "I know that does not fix anything. I know words cannot make up for 5 years." But I am sorry, Sutton, for whatever I did, whatever choice I made that led to this. I'm sorry. The apology settled over her like a blanket, warm but suffocating. She was not ready to forgive him, was not sure she ever would be, but she was also not ready to send him away again. The investigator will have answers in a few days, she said, standing up. Until then, you can stay with Opal if she agrees, but I need you to keep your distance from Willa until we know more. Sutton, he started, but she held up a hand. I am not being cruel, she said firmly. I am being careful. That little girl already thinks you are her father. If the tests come back and you are not, or if your past turns out to be more dangerous than you remember, I need to be able to protect her. She met his eyes. You understand that, do not you? Briggs nodded slowly. The man he used to be, the one who rode with outlaws and lived by his own rules, that man might have argued, might have demanded his rights. But the man he was now wounded and lost, and looking at a daughter he could not remember, he understood completely. I will keep my distance, he agreed. But Sutton, the way he said her name made her heart ache. However, this turns out I am glad I got to meet her, even if it was only for a few hours. Sutton gathered her sleeping daughter in her arms, feeling the familiar weight of Willa's small body against her chest. The child stirred slightly but did not wake, her face peaceful in the lamplight. At the door she paused and looked back at Briggs. Why did I keep the picture, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Why did I look at it every night, even after I married Langford? Even after I told myself I had moved on? Briggs had no answer, but something in his expression, some flicker of hope beneath all that confusion and pain, told her he was asking himself the same question. She stepped out into the night, carrying her daughter and the weight of everything she did not yet understand. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine roared to life, its sound echoing through the quiet streets like a ghost from another lifetime. Sutton strapped Willa into her car seat and sat behind the wheel, not starting the engine just yet. She stared at the cottage, at the warm light spilling from its windows, at the silhouette of the man inside. 5 years ago, she had loved him with everything she had. He had been wild and dangerous and absolutely wrong for her, and she had loved him anyway. Then he disappeared, and she had rebuilt herself into someone new, someone safer, someone who would never be left behind again. But sitting here now with her daughter asleep in the back seat and her past waiting in a stranger's living room, she realized that the woman she had become was just another kind of prison. The question was not whether Briggs was Willa's father. The test would answer that soon enough. The real question was what she would do with the truth, whatever it turned out to be. She started the car and drove into the darkness, the future stretching ahead of her like an unwritten story. Somewhere behind her, Briggs watched from the window, his heart full of something he could not name but recognized instinctively. Hope, maybe. Or the first stirrings of love, remembered through the pee of a broken mind. Or simply the certainty that whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days passed like 3 lifetimes. Sutton went through the motions of her daily life, attending meetings and signing documents and smiling at Langford across the dinner table. But her mind was elsewhere, spinning through possibilities and fears and hopes she had not allowed herself to feel in years. The private investigator called on the morning of the 4th day. I have information, Jack Thompson said, his voice carefully neutral. You are going to want to hear this in person. They met at a coffee shop downtown, a quiet corner booth where no one would overhear. Thompson slid a manila folder across the table, its contents thick with documents and photographs. Your man has an interesting history, Thompson began. Robert Briggs, member of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club from 2012 to 2019. Multiple arrests for minor offenses, nothing major. But here is where it gets complicated. Sutton opened the folder with trembling hands. Photographs of Briggs in his younger days, leather vest, pristine eyes, sharp and clear. Arrest records, hospital reports. In late 2019, there was a major conflict within the club. Thompson continued. Internal power struggle. Several members ended up dead or missing. Briggs was one of the missing. The official theory was that he was killed, but no body was ever found. He was not killed, Sutton said. He is alive. He is sitting in Opal's living room right now, I know. Thompson leaned forward. What is interesting is what happened around the same time. Someone made a series of payments to certain members of the Iron Wolves, large payments, the kind that buy silence and cooperation. He paused significantly. The money came from a shell company, but I traced it back to its source. Sutton's blood ran cold. Thompson pulled out another document, sliding it across the table. The shell company is connected to Harrison Financial Group. He met her eyes. Your husband's firm. The world seemed to tilt beneath Sutton's feet. She gripped the edge of the table, struggling to process what she was hearing. That does not make sense, she whispered. Langford did not even know Briggs. They never met. Are you sure about that? Thompson asked. Because the timing suggests otherwise. The payments started 2 weeks before Briggs disappeared, and they continued for 3 months after until the Iron Wolves confirmed that he was gone. Sutton's mind raced through the timeline. She had met Langford at a charity event just weeks after Briggs vanished. He had been charming and attentive, a perfect gentleman who seemed to appear exactly when she needed someone to lean on. She had never questioned the coincidence. There is something else, Thompson said, his voice gentler now. The hospital records from Briggs's motorcycle accident 2 years ago. He was found on a rural highway badly injured. No identification on him. The hospital listed him as a John Doe for 3 weeks before he was stable enough to give his name. What does that mean? It means he was alone, Thompson said. Whatever happened, wherever he went after he left you, he ended up alone on a highway with no one looking for him. He paused. The head trauma from the accident would explain the memory loss. It is consistent with the medical reports. Sutton sat back in the booth, the folder spread open before her, like a map of secrets she had never known existed. So what you are telling me, she said slowly, is that my husband may have paid to have Briggs disappear, and that Briggs has been wandering alone for 5 years with no memory of who he was or why he left. That is one interpretation, Thompson agreed. But we need more evidence to be certain. He gathered his materials. I would recommend being careful around your husband. If he was involved in this, he may not react well to Briggs resurfacing. Sutton nodded numbly, her mind already racing ahead to the confrontation that would have to come. But not yet. Not until she had all the pieces. One more thing, she said as Thompson stood to leave. The DNA test I requested. For Willa. Thompson reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. The results came back this morning, he said. I think you already know what they say. Sutton took the envelope with shaking hands. She did not open it. Not here, not now, not in a coffee shop where strangers might see her fall apart. But she knew, had known from the moment she saw Willa sitting beside Briggs, their features aligned in a way that no amount of denial could erase. Her daughter had found her father, and now Sutton had to decide what to do about it. She drove to Opal's cottage without going home first. The manila folder sat on her passenger seat, heavy with revelations she was not ready to share. But there was one piece of information Briggs deserved to know. One truth that could not wait any longer. He was sitting on Opal's front porch when she arrived, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the morning light filter through the trees. He looked better than he had 3 days ago. Stronger. The color had returned to his face and his eyes held more clarity than before. You should not be out here, Sutton said, climbing the porch steps. What if someone sees you? Opal's street is quiet, Briggs replied. No one comes down this way except the mailman, and he already knows I am here. He studied her face. You have news. It was not a question. He could read her too well, even after 5 years and a head injury that had stolen most of his memories. Sutton sat down in the chair beside him, the envelope from the investigator clutched in her hands. The DNA results came back. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Willa is yours. Briggs was silent for a long moment. His coffee cup trembled slightly in his hands before he set it carefully on the porch railing. I have a daughter, he said finally, testing the words like they might disappear if he did not hold them carefully. A real daughter. My blood. Yes. He turned to look at her, those impossibly blue eyes filled with emotions too complex to name. All those years, he said. She was growing up, learning to walk and talk and read. She was becoming a person. And I was not there. He shook his head slowly. I do not know what happened, Sutton. I do not know why I left or where I went. But I know this, whatever the reason it was, not because I did not love you, it was not because I did not want a future with you. Sutton felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. The investigator found something else, she said, pulling out a document from the folder. Payments made to members of the Iron Wolves right before you disappeared. She met his eyes. The money came from my husband's company. Briggs took the document, scanning it with eyes that grew harder with each line. Someone paid for me to disappear, he said flatly. Your husband. Maybe. Sutton's voice was steadier now, fueled by the anger building in her chest. Or maybe it was just his company. I do not know yet, but I am going to find out. Briggs set the document down, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. I am starting to remember, he said quietly. Pieces, fragments, a man in a suit telling me that you would be safer without me, that my presence in your life was putting you in danger. He closed his eyes. I thought I was protecting you. I thought leaving was the only way to keep you safe. And now, Sutton asked, now I think I was manipulated. He opened his eyes and she saw something new in their depths. Determination, purpose. Now I think someone wanted me gone and they used my love for you to make it happen. The weight of his words settled over both of them. 5 years of separation, a daughter raised without her father, a marriage built on lies and convenience, and underneath it all, a love that had never truly died. What do we do now? Sutton asked. Briggs looked at her, and for the first time since he had woken up on Opal's couch, she saw the man she remembered. The one who had made her feel like anything was possible. The one who had loved her with everything he had. Now he said we find out the truth. All of it. And then we figure out what comes next. Inside the cottage, Willa's voice drifted through the screen door, asking Opal for another cookie. The sound of her laughter, innocent and carefree, cut through the heavy silence on the porch. Sutton looked at Briggs, then at the door where their daughter played, unaware of the storm gathering around her. Whatever came next, whatever truths they uncovered, one thing was certain: they were no longer facing it alone. The family that should have existed 5 years ago was finally beginning to take shape. And nothing, not secrets or lies or powerful men with hidden agendas, was going to tear them apart again. The days that followed the DNA revelation moved with the strange rhythm of a life caught between two worlds. Sutton continued to live in the apartment, with Langford continued to smile across the breakfast table and attend the evening events that filled their social calendar. But her heart was somewhere else entirely. It was at Opal's cottage, where her daughter spent every afternoon learning to trust again. Willa had taken to visiting Briggs with a determination that bordered on obsession. Each day after school, she would tug at Sutton's hand, her small face set with purpose, asking to see her father. The word came easily to her now, as natural as breathing. Daddy. Sutton could not refuse her, could not bear to see the disappointment that clouded Willa's features whenever she suggested they stay home instead. So she drove to Opal's cottage every afternoon, sitting in the kitchen with the elderly woman, while Willa and Briggs explored the backyard or worked on small projects at the old workbench Opal kept in her garage. Today they were building something. Sutton could hear their voices drifting through the open window, punctuated by the soft tap of a hammer and Willa's occasional giggle. She is good for him, Opal observed, pouring another cup of tea. He has been different since she started coming around. More present, more himself. Sutton wrapped her hands around her own cup, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. I barely recognize him sometimes, she admitted. The man I knew was so angry, so restless, like he was always fighting against something invisible. Maybe he was fighting against himself, Opal suggested gently, fighting against what he wanted and what he thought he deserved. Through the window, Sutton watched as Briggs knelt beside Willa, guiding her small hands as she positioned a nail against a piece of wood. His patience seemed infinite, his voice low and encouraging as he explained each step. When the nail went in crooked, he did not scold or take over. He simply helped her try again. Langford had never done anything like that. In 5 years of marriage, Sutton could not recall a single instance where her husband had knelt in the dirt beside Willa, could not remember him teaching her anything beyond the importance of good manners and proper behavior. He treated their daughter like a decorative object, something to be displayed at appropriate moments, and ignored the rest of the time. But Briggs treated her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings and clumsy attempts at carpentry were the most important things in the world. Tell me about your day, Briggs said, his voice carrying through the window. What happened at school? Willa launched into a detailed account of everything from her morning circle time to the argument she had witnessed between two boys over a red crayon. She talked about her teacher's new dress and the caterpillar the class was raising in a jar, and the way her best friend had shared her cookies at lunch. Briggs listened to all of it. He asked questions and laughed at the funny parts and nodded seriously at the serious parts. He gave her the attention she had been starving for her entire young life. He really does love her. Sutton murmured more to herself than to Opal. Of course he does, the older woman replied. She is his daughter, his blood. Some things do not need memory to be true. Later, when the sun began to set and the shadows grew long across Opal's garden, Sutton called Willa inside to go home. The little girl's face fell immediately, her lower lip pushing out in a pout that was equal parts heartbreaking and endearing. But we did not finish the birdhouse, she protested. Daddy says the birds need somewhere to live before winter comes. Briggs appeared in the doorway behind her sawdust, clinging to his flannel shirt. His eyes met Sutton's across the small kitchen, and something passed between them. An understanding. A question. We can finish it tomorrow, he said gently, crouching down to Willa's level. The birds will be okay for one more night. I promise. Willa considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Do you promise, she asked. With the special promise, Briggs held up his hand, pinky extended. Willa wrapped her own tiny pinky around his and they shook once. A ritual they had developed over the past weeks. A bond that went deeper than words. Pinky promise, Briggs confirmed. The birdhouse will be ready for the birds. You have my word. Satisfied, Willa turned and hugged his legs tightly before running to gather her backpack and the drawings she had made that afternoon. Briggs watched her go, his expression soft with something that looked almost like wonder. She is incredible, he said quietly, not quite meeting Sutton's eyes. You did that. You raised her to be this amazing little person. She raised herself mostly. Sutton replied, the honesty slipping out before she could stop it. I was always too busy, too focused on work and social obligations. She paused. Langford was worse. Briggs's jaw tightened at the mention of her husband's name, but he did not say anything. They had not discussed the investigators' findings again, both of them waiting for more information before drawing final conclusions. But the suspicion hung between them like a storm cloud on the horizon. I should get her home, Sutton said, reaching for her purse. Langford will be wondering where we are. She did not miss the way Briggs's hands clenched at his sides. Did not miss the flash of something dark in his eyes before he shuddered it away. Tomorrow then, he said, stepping back to let them pass. Tomorrow. Sutton drove home with Willa chattering happily in the back seat about all the things she planned to do with her daddy the next day. The word still sent a jolt through Sutton's heart every time she heard it. Daddy. Such a simple word. Such an enormous weight. The apartment was dark when they arrived, which meant Langford was still at the office. Sutton felt her shoulders relax slightly as she helped Willa with her bath and bedtime routine. These quiet evening moments had become precious to her, stolen hours of peace before her husband returned and the careful performance of their marriage resumed. Mommy, Willa said as Sutton tucked the blankets around her small body. Can Daddy come live with us? Sutton's hand stilled on the comforter. She looked down at her daughter's earnest face, searching for the right words. It is complicated, sweetheart. Why? Because Mommy is married to Langford. Because your daddy has been gone for a long time. Because I do not know how to explain any of this to a 5-year-old. Because grown-ups make things complicated. Sometimes, Sutton finally said, even when they should not. Willa considered this with her usual seriousness. Langford does not like me, she said matter-of-factly. He pretends to when other people are watching, but when we are alone, he does not even look at me. She paused. Daddy looks at me. He really sees me. The words were a knife to Sutton's heart. I know, baby. I know he does. So why can he not live with us? Willa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why do we have to live with someone who does not love us when Daddy is right there? And he does. Sutton had no answer. She gathered her daughter into her arms and held her tightly, feeling Willa's small body shake with the sobs she had been holding in. I do not want to live here anymore, Willa whispered against her mother's shoulder. I want to live with Daddy and you and Opal. I want to be a real family. The sound of the front door opening cut through the moment. Langford's footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by the distinctive click of his briefcase being set on the entry table. Sutton pressed a kiss to Willa's forehead. Go to sleep, sweetheart. We will talk more tomorrow. She closed Willa's bedroom door softly behind her and walked down the hall to face her husband. Langford stood in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He had loosened his tie, a rare concession to comfort that suggested the day had been particularly stressful. His eyes tracked Sutton as she entered the room, sharp and assessing. Where were you this afternoon? He asked, his voice deceptively casual. I called the apartment. No answer. We were at Opal's house. Willa has been spending time there after school. Langford's glass paused halfway to his lips. The housekeeper's place. With that man, his name is Briggs. And yes, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Langford set his glass down on the counter with controlled precision, the kind of deliberate movement that preceded his worst moods. I thought we discussed this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. That man is not to be near our daughter. She is not your daughter. The words escaped before Sutton could stop them. They hung in the air between them, irrevocable, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. Langford's face went very still. What did you say? Sutton's heart pounded in her chest, but she did not look away. Willa is not your daughter, she repeated steadier this time. She is mine and Briggs's. The DNA results confirmed it. The silence that followed was more frightening than any explosion could have been. Langford stared at her with eyes that had gone flat and cold, the mask of the charming businessman slipping to reveal something harder beneath. So you had tests done, he said finally. Behind my back, without my knowledge. I had to know the truth. The truth. Langford laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You want to talk about truth? Let us talk about how you lied to me for 5 years. How you let me believe that child was mine. How you trapped me in this marriage with a baby that belonged to some low-life biker. I never said she was yours. Sutton fired back. You assumed. You saw a pregnant woman in need and you saw an opportunity, an image. The perfect wife with the perfect daughter to complete your perfect life. She stepped closer, emboldened by years of suppressed anger. But it was never real, was it? You never loved us. We were just accessories to your ambition. Langford's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with bruising force. You do not know what you are talking about. Then explain it to me. Sutton did not flinch even as his fingers dug into her skin. Explain why your company made payments to the Iron Wolves right before Briggs disappeared. Explain why someone wanted him gone badly enough to pay for it. Something flickered in Langford's eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. You have been digging into things that do not concern you. Everything about my daughter's father concerns me. He released her wrist, stepping back with a visible effort to regain his composure. His mask slid back into place, smooth and practiced. Whatever you think you have found, he said carefully, it does not change anything. You are my wife. This is your home. That man is a criminal with a history of violence and God knows what else. He has no place in your life or in Willa's. That is not your decision to make anymore. Langford's eyes narrowed. Be very careful, Sutton. You have a comfortable life here. Financial security, social standing. All of that goes away if you walk out that door. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. And I promise you, I will make it as painful as possible. The threat hung between them, clear and unmistakable. But Sutton had spent 5 years being careful. 5 years walking on eggshells. 5 years pretending to be someone she was not for the sake of stability and appearances. She was tired of being careful. Then make it painful, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I would rather struggle with people who love me than live in luxury with someone who does not. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Langford standing alone with his whiskey and his threats. That night she packed a bag. Not enough to seem like she was leaving permanently. Just enough to buy herself time. A change of clothes, her important documents, the small box of memories she had kept hidden in the back of her closet for 5 years. The box with Briggs's photograph inside. She sat on the edge of her bed in the darkness, turning the photograph over in her hands. He was younger in this picture, his face less weathered, his eyes bright with the reckless confidence of youth. She had taken it on their last night together, laughing as he pretended to pose like a model, mugging for the camera with exaggerated expressions. That was before everything fell apart, before he disappeared, before she discovered she was carrying his child and had to decide what kind of life she could offer a baby alone. Langford had seemed like the answer at the time. Stable, successful, willing to marry a pregnant woman and raise another man's child as his own. She had been grateful, desperate enough to ignore the red flags that appeared almost immediately, the way he controlled every aspect of their lives, the coldness that crept into his eyes when he thought no one was watching, the careful distance he maintained from Willa. never quite warming to a daughter who was not his blood. She had traded passion for security, had convinced herself it was the mature choice, the responsible choice. But responsibility without love was just another kind of prison. At dawn, Sutton loaded her bag into the car and drove to Opal's cottage. The elderly woman was already awake, tending to her garden in the soft morning light. She looked up as Sutton's car pulled into the driveway, understanding dawning on her weathered face. "Trouble at home," Opal said. It was not a question. "You could say that." Opal nodded and stepped aside, gesturing toward the cottage. "Coffee is on. Briggs is still sleeping. Come inside before the neighbors start to talk." The cottage felt different in the early morning light, softer somehow, more like a home than any place Sutton had lived in years. She sat at Opal's kitchen table, wrapping her hands around a cup of strong black coffee, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. Briggs appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He froze when he saw Sutton's surprise flickering across his features. "Something happened," he said. "I confronted Langford, told him about the DNA results, about the payments to the Iron Wolves." Briggs moved slowly into the kitchen, settling into the chair across from her. His presence was solid and grounding a counterweight to the chaos swirling in her mind. How did he react badly? He made threats, said he would make things painful if I left. "But you are here." "I am here." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the situation settling around them like a fog. I remembered something Briggs said finally. "Last night, I was dreaming and it turned into a memory." He met her eyes across the table. "The night I left." Sutton's breath caught in her throat. "What do you remember?" Briggs closed his eyes, his brow furrowing with concentration. "We were at your apartment, the old one, not the place you live now. There was music playing, something slow. You were talking about the future, about how things might be different." He paused, the memory clearly painful. "And I was scared. More scared than I had ever been." "Why were you scared?" "Because I loved you." Briggs opened his eyes and Sutton saw the raw emotion there. "Because I knew the life I was living would destroy everything good that was starting to grow between us. The club was getting more dangerous. There were people who wanted me dead. And if they could not get to me, they would get to the people I cared about. So you left to protect me. I thought I was protecting you." Briggs' voice cracked. "I thought that if I disappeared, if I removed myself from your life completely, you would be safe. You could move on, find someone normal, someone who did not come with a death sentence attached." Sutton felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You should have told me. You should have let me decide. I know that now. But back then I thought I was making the only choice I could." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers without quite touching. "And then I was gone, and I could not find my way back. The accident, the memory loss. By the time I knew my own name again, years had passed. I did not know where you were. Did not know if you had moved on. Did not know about Willa." His voice broke on their daughter's name. "I did not know I had a daughter," he whispered. "All those years she was growing up without me, and I did not even know she existed." Sutton closed the distance between their hands, her fingers wrapping around his. "You know now. Yes, I know now." They stayed like that for a long time, hands intertwined across Opal's kitchen table, letting the weight of year in silence begin to lift. The next few days moved quickly. Sutton arranged to take time off from work, citing family emergency. She moved some of her things to Opal's cottage, setting up a temporary arrangement while she figured out her next steps. Willa was overjoyed at the change bouncing between the adults with a happiness that bordered on mania. "Is this real?" she kept asking. "Are we really going to live together now?" For a little while, Sutton would answer carefully, "Until we figure some things out." But the careful words did little to dampen Willa's enthusiasm. She threw herself into the new routine with abandon, helping Opal in the garden, working on the birdhouse with Briggs, telling elaborate stories to anyone who would listen about how her family was finally together. Watching her, Sutton felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had not even known was there slowly unraveling. But the peace could not last. On the fourth day, Langford's lawyer sent the first letter. Custody, property, financial assets. The document was thick with legal language, every paragraph designed to maximize pressure and minimize options. "He is not playing around," Opal observed, reading over Sutton's shoulder. "This man wants to hurt you. He wants to control me, Sutton corrected. There is a difference. Briggs paced the small living room, his hands clenched at his sides. I should confront him. Man to man, make him understand that he cannot threaten you like this and end up in jail for assault. Sutton shook her head. No, that is exactly what he wants. He is trying to provoke a reaction, to make you look unstable, dangerous, but I am not. I know that. But the courts might not. She set the letter aside with deliberate calm. We have to be smart about this. Document everything. Build a case. Show the world who he really is. The words sounded confident, but doubt gnawed at her insides. Langford had resources, connections, the kind of power that bent rules and influenced outcomes. She had truth. But truth did not always win. That night after Willa had gone to sleep and Opal had retired to her room, Sutton and Briggs sat on the front porch watching the stars emerge one by one. Are you sure about this? Briggs asked quietly. You could go back, apologize. He would probably take you back if you asked nicely enough. Go back to what Sutton's voice was hollow. A marriage that was never real. A husband who paid to have you removed from my life. She shook her head. I cannot pretend anymore. Even if it would be easier, it will not be easier for long. Briggs warned, he will make good on his threats. Things will get hard. I know. And you are still choosing this, choosing uncertainty and struggle over comfort and stability. Sutton turned to look at him, really look at him in the soft light spilling from the cottage windows. I am choosing to stop living a lie, she said. I am choosing to give our daughter a real family, even if it looks nothing like what society says a family should be. I am choosing to believe that love is worth fighting for, even when the fight is hard. Briggs was quiet for a long moment. What about us? He finally asked. You and me, is there still something there? The question hung in the darkness between them, heavy with possibility and fear. I do not know, Sutton admitted. So much has changed. We have both become different people. She paused, searching for honest words. But I know that when I am with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. I know that watching you with Willa makes my heart ache in ways I thought I had forgotten. I know that the woman I was before, the one who loved you with everything she had, she is still in here somewhere. She pressed her hand to her chest. Whether that is enough, whether we can build something new from the pieces of what we were, I do not know. But I want to find out. If you do, Briggs reached out his large hand, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. I have spent years wandering, he said softly. Years with no home, no purpose, no memory of who I was supposed to be. And then I woke up on Opal's couch and there was this little girl looking at me with my own eyes calling me daddy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. His thumb traced her cheekbone. In that moment I knew. Whatever I had lost, whatever I could not remember, this was what mattered. You, her, the chance to be part of something real. He leaned closer. So yes, Sutton, I want to find out. I want to try. Their lips met in the darkness, a kiss that tasted of years and loss and the fragile hope of second chances. It was not the passionate collision of their youth. It was something softer, something earned through suffering and separation, something that felt like coming home. The morning after brought new challenges. Sutton's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, friends, acquaintances. Word had spread that she had left Langford. The social circle she had cultivated for 5 years closed ranks, most of them siding with her husband. She was the one who had disrupted the order of things, the one who had chosen scandal over stability. She turned off her phone and focused on what mattered. Mommy, look, Willa called from the garden, holding up a handful of wildflowers. These are for the table. Daddy says they will make the cottage smell nice. Sutton smiled and accepted the bouquet. They are beautiful, sweetheart. Daddy says we can plant more in the spring. Maybe vegetables too. He says I can have my own garden. The casual way Willa spoke about the future made Sutton's heart clench. Her daughter was already planning ahead, already building a life in her mind that included Briggs as a permanent fixture. But nothing was permanent yet. Nothing was settled. That afternoon, while Willa napped and Briggs helped Opal with some repairs around the cottage, Sutton received a call from her lawyer. The news was not good. Langford is claiming abandonment, the lawyer explained. He says you left the marital home without cause and took the child without his permission. He is not her biological father. The law does not always care about biology. He has been acting as her father for 5 years. He has rights at least until we can prove otherwise in court. Sutton felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. What do I do? For now, maintain the status quo. Do not do anything that could be seen as hiding the child or alienating her from Langford. The lawyer paused. And document everything. Every conversation, every interaction. We need to build a case that he is unfit to have custody. She hung up feeling more uncertain than before. The path she had chosen was getting steeper, the obstacles more numerous. Part of her wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But then she looked out the window and saw Willa in the garden chattering happily to Opal about the birds that would live in the birdhouse she and Daddy had built. And she knew she could not go back. Not now, not ever, ever. The confrontation came 3 days later. Langford appeared at Opal's cottage, unannounced, his expensive car, looking absurdly out of place on the quiet street. Sutton saw him from the window and felt her stomach drop. Stay inside, she told Briggs, who had risen at the sound of the car. Take Willa to the back bedroom. I should be there. If he sees you, it will escalate. Please, trust me. Something in her eyes must have convinced him, because he nodded and disappeared down the hall, Willa's hand in his. Sutton stepped onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind her. Langford climbed out of his car, his face a mask of controlled anger. He was dressed impeccably, as always, not a hair out of place. The image of a successful man who had everything under control. She knew better. This has gone far enough, he said, without preamble. Get your things. Get the girl. We are going home. This is not something you can command away, Langford. I am not coming back. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. Do you have any idea what you are doing? The embarrassment you are causing. People are talking, Sutton. My colleagues, my clients. Everyone is wondering what happened to the perfect marriage. Maybe they should have wondered a long time ago. I gave you everything. A home, security, a name. And this is how you repay me. Sutton stood her ground, refusing to be cowed. You gave me a cage, she said evenly. A beautiful cage with golden bars, but a cage nonetheless. And I am done living in it. Langford's mask slipped, revealing the ugly truth beneath. You think that man can take care of you? A washed-up biker with brain damage and a criminal record? He will drag you down to his level. You and the girl both. At least he loves us. The words landed like a slap. Langford's face went red, then white. Love, he spat. Love does not pay the bills. Love does not give you a place in society. Love does not protect you when the world deities you are nothing. You are wrong, Sutton said quietly. Love is the only thing that ever really protected anyone. And I would rather have it in poverty than live without it in luxury. She turned to go back inside, but Langford grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. This is not over, he growled. I will destroy you. I will take everything you have. That child will never call that man daddy again, not if I have anything to say about it. The door opened behind her and Briggs stepped out. His face was calm, but his eyes held a warning that made even Langford hesitate. I think you should leave now. Briggs said, his voice low and steady. Langford released Sutton's arm, stepping back with a sneer. The criminal speaks. Tell me, does she know all the things you did for the Iron Wolves? All the blood on your hands, I know enough. Sutton interjected before Briggs could respond. I know that whatever he did, he was trying to survive. And I know that you paid to have him removed from my life so you could swoop in and play the hero. She moved to stand beside Briggs, presenting a united front. What does that say about you? Langford's face twisted with rage. You will regret this, he promised. Both of you. He stalked back to his car and drove away, tires screeching against the pavement. The sound echoed long after he had disappeared from sight. Sutton's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Briggs had not been there to catch her. It is okay, he murmured, holding her close. It is going to be okay. But they both knew it was not true. The battle was just beginning. That night, the storm broke. Sutton sat at Opal's kitchen table staring at the legal documents spread before her. Emergency custody motion. Allegations of parental alienation. Request for supervised visitation. Langford was making good on his threats. He cannot win this, Briggs said, but his voice lacked conviction. He has money. Connections. The best lawyers his firm can buy. Sutton's voice was hollow. And what do we have? The truth. The truth does not always win. She looked at him across the table, seeing the frustration and helplessness in his eyes. He wanted to fix this, wanted to protect her and Willa the way he had failed to do 5 years ago. But there was nothing he could do against an army of lawyers and a man determined to destroy them. Maybe I should go, Briggs said quietly. Sutton's head snapped up. What? Maybe if I was not in the picture, he would back off, give you a chance to negotiate. He could not meet her eyes. I am the complication, the threat to his ego. If I disappeared again, maybe he would let you and Willa go. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. Briggs flinched. You cannot leave again. Sutton said, her voice breaking. You cannot disappear and expect me to pick up the pieces. Not again. Not after everything. I am trying to protect you. I do not need you to protect me by abandoning me. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I need you to stay, to fight beside me, to be the father Willa has been waiting for her entire life. But what if I cannot give you that? What if all I bring is trouble and pain? Then we face the trouble and pain together. She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I made my choice, Briggs. I chose you. I chose us. And I need you to choose us too. Not because it is easy or because you think you can fix everything, but because we are stronger together than we are apart. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I do not deserve you. Maybe not. She allowed a ghost of a smile crossing her face. But you have me anyway, so deal with it. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. They stood like that for a long time, holding on to each other in the darkness. But when morning came, Briggs was gone. His bag was missing from the guest room. The motorcycle he had recovered from the impound lot was no longer parked in Opal's driveway. Only a note remained propped against the coffee pot where she would be sure to find it. I am sorry. I thought this was the only way to keep you safe. Please do not hate me. Sutton crumpled the paper in her fist, rage and grief warring in her chest. He had left again. After everything she had said, after all the promises they had made, he had disappeared into the night like he always did. The sound of small footsteps made her turn. Willa stood in the doorway, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Where is Daddy? The question shattered what remained of Sutton's composure. She knelt down, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. He had to go away for a little while, she managed. But he will come back, I promise. Willa's body went rigid. No, sweetheart. No, Willa pulled back, her face crumpling. You made him go away, just like before. Just like everyone said you would. I did not make him leave, baby. He chose to go. Because of you. Willa's voice rose to a scream. You always make everything bad. You never listen. You never let me be happy. That is not true. I hate you. The words hit Sutton like physical blows. I hate you for making him go away. Willa was sobbing now, her small body shaking with the force of her grief. He is the only one who listens to me. He is the only one who loves me for real. And you made him leave. Baby, please. But Willa had already turned and run, her bedroom door slamming behind her with a sound like a gunshot. Sutton sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her hopes. Her daughter hated her. The man she loved had abandoned her. The life she had tried to build was crumbling faster than she could hold it together. Opal found her there an hour later, still sitting in the same spot, staring at nothing. The older woman did not ask questions. She simply sat down beside Sutton and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. He will come back, Opal said quietly. How do you know? 'Cause I saw the way he looked at you. At that little girl. Opal shook her head. A man does not look at people like that and just walk away. Not really, not forever. He walked away before, and he spent 5 years lost and broken because of it. Opal squeezed her shoulder. He will not make that mistake again. Whatever drove him to leave, he will realize it is wrong. He will come back. Sutton wanted to believe her, wanted to have faith in the love she thought they had rebuilt. But faith was hard to find in the wreckage of the morning. She thought about Willa's words, about the pain in her daughter's voice, about all the years she had spent building a safe life that was not really safe at all. And she made a decision. She was not going to sit here and wait for Briggs to come back. She was not going to let circumstances control her fate anymore. She had spent 5 years being passive, letting life happen to her instead of making it happen for herself. That ended now. Sutton stood up, wiping her eyes. "Watch Willa for me," she said to Opal. "I have something I need to do." "Where are you going?" "To find him, and to remind him what he is running away from." Because this time she was not going to wait for love to return to her. This time she was going to chase it down. The morning after Briggs disappeared, Sutton did not cry. She had cried enough, had spent too many years letting tears be her only response to abandonment and loss. This time would be different. This time she would act. She called Jack Thompson before the sun had fully risen, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning in her chest. "I need you to find him again," she said. "The man from before." Briggs, Thompson's silence on the other end spoke volumes. He left, the investigator said, finally. "It was not a question." He left. "But I am not going to let that be the end of the story." She could almost hear Thompson nodding through the phone. "Give me 24 hours. I will find him." Sutton hung up and turned to face the day. There was work to be done. While Thompson tracked Briggs, Sutton focused on the other battle she had been avoiding. She drove to her lawyer's office, a modest firm downtown that specialized in family law. The receptionist looked up with surprise when she walked in without an appointment. "I need to file for divorce," Sutton said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Today, right now, the paperwork took hours. Forms and signatures and declarations that reduce 5 years of marriage to a stack of legal documents." Sutton signed each one without hesitation, feeling lighter with every stroke of the pen. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, watched her with something like admiration. "Most clients take weeks to reach this point," Patricia observed. "You seem remarkably certain." "I have been certain for years," Sutton replied. "I just did not have the courage to admit it." She left the office with copies of the divorce petition in her bag and a court date scheduled for the following month. The process would be ugly. Langford would fight her every step of the way. But she had made her decision, and nothing he could do would change it. That afternoon, she returned to Opal's cottage to find Willa sitting alone in the garden, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes red from crying. The little girl did not look up when Sutton approached. "I brought you something," Sutton said softly, settling onto the grass beside her daughter. She pulled a small photograph from her pocket, the one of Briggs she had kept hidden for 5 years. Willa glanced at it briefly, then looked away. "He is gone." "For now," Sutton agreed. "But I am going to find him." Why? The question was loaded with accusation. Willa still blamed her for Briggs' departure, still believed that somehow her mother had driven him away. "Because I love him," Sutton said simply. "And because you love him. And because our family deserves a chance to be together." Willa was quiet for a long moment. "What if he does not want to come back? Then I will bring him back anyway." A ghost of a smile crossed Willa's face. "You cannot make someone come back if they do not want to. Watch me." The determination in Sutton's voice made Willa look at her properly for the first time all day. Something shifted in the little girl's expression. Doubt giving way to hope. "Do you really think you can find him?" "I found him once before," Sutton reminded her, "in a dumpster behind our apartment building." She reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Willa's ear. "If a 5-year-old with pigtails can find a Hell's Angel in a pile of trash, I think her mother can track him down in the real world." Willa almost smiled. "Almost. Will you bring him home? I will try my very best." It was not a promise. Sutton had learned better than to make promises she was not certain she could keep. But it was enough. Willa leaned against her shoulder, and for the first time since Briggs had left, some of the tension eased from her small body. They sat together in the garden until the sun began to set, mother and daughter united in their hope for something better. Thompson called the next morning. "Found him," the investigator reported. "He is in a small town called Miller's Peak, about 6 hours north of here. Mountain community. Population maybe 300. He has been renting a cabin on the outskirts of town." Sutton's heart leaped. "How did you find him so quickly?" His motorcycle, Thompson explained. Distinctive enough to be memorable. A waitress at a diner recognized the description. "Said he comes in for coffee every morning. Keeps to himself mostly. Is he okay?" "Physically, he seems fine." Thompson paused. "But the woman I talked to said he looks lost, like a man who is not sure where he belongs." Sutton closed her eyes, imagining Briggs alone in some remote cabin, punishing himself for a decision he thought was right. "Send me the address, already in your email." Thompson hesitated. "Mrs. Carter, I have to ask. What are you planning to do?" "I am planning to bring him home. And if he does not want to come, then I will remind him what he is leaving behind. She hung up and began packing immediately. A bag with enough clothes for a few days, Willa's favorite stuffed animal. The photograph of Briggs that she had carried for 5 years. Everything she might need to convince a stubborn man that running away was not the answer. Opal appeared in the doorway of the guest room, watching Sutton fold clothes into her small suitcase. You are going after him. Someone has to. The elderly woman nodded slowly, a smile creasing her weathered face. Good. That man needs someone to chase him. He has been running from himself for too long. Sutton paused in her packing. Will you watch Willa while I am gone? Of course, Opal stepped into the room and placed a gentle hand on Sutton's arm. But bring him back quickly. That little girl needs her father. And I suspect you need him too. Sutton hugged her impulsively, gratitude flooding through her. Thank you for everything. Just bring our family back together, Opal said. That will be thanks enough. The drive to Miller's Peak took nearly 7 hours longer than Thompson had estimated. The roads grew increasingly narrow as Sutton left the highway behind, winding through mountains that seemed to scrape the scum. Forests of pine and fir pressed close on either side, their dark green branches forming a canopy that blocked out much of the afternoon sun. She had never been to this part of the country before, had never imagined that such wild, untamed beauty existed so close to the city where she had spent her entire adult life. The air grew cooler as she climbed, carrying the scent of pine needles and distant snow. Miller's Peak itself was little more than a main street lined with weathered buildings, a general store, a post office, a diner with a hand-painted sign that promised the best coffee in 3 counties. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. Sutton parked outside the diner and went in her designer clothes, drawing curious glances from the handful of locals nursing their afternoon coffee. The waitress behind the counter was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. You are not from around here, she observed. I am looking for someone, Sutton said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. A man, tall, broad shoulders, beard. He rides a motorcycle. The waitress's expression shifted subtly, recognition mixed with caution. You a cop? Num. Nothing like that. Sutton hesitated, then decided on honesty. He is my daughter's father. He left a few days ago, and I need to find him. The waitress studied her for a long moment, assessing her in the way that small-town people assessed outsiders. Whatever she saw must have passed muster because she nodded slowly. The cabin on Old Forest Road, about 2 miles up past the old sawmill. You will see his bike parked out front. Thank you. Sutton turned to leave, but the waitress's voice stopped her. He seems like a man who is running from something. The woman's eyes were knowing. Maybe what he needs is someone to run toward. The words stayed with Sutton as she drove up the winding road toward the cabin. Someone to run toward. That was exactly what she intended to be. The cabin appeared through the trees just as the waitress had described. Small but well-maintained, with smoke curling from a stone chimney and a familiar motorcycle parked under a makeshift shelter. The sight of that bike made Sutton's breath catch in her throat. He was here. He was real. He had not disappeared into the ether like last time. She parked her car and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. The drive had given her plenty of time to plan what she would say, but now that she was here, all those carefully rehearsed words seemed inadequate. What did you say to a man who kept leaving because he thought he was protecting you? How did you convince someone that his presence was worth more than his absence, no matter what demons haunted his past? She did not have the answers, but she had come too far to turn back now. Sutton stepped out of the car and walked toward the cabin, her feet crunching on the gravel path. The late afternoon light filtered through the trees, dappling everything in shades of gold and green. It was beautiful here, peaceful. She could understand why Briggs had chosen this place to hide. But hiding was not the same as healing, and she had not driven 7 hours to let him hide anymore. She climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door. For a long moment there was no response. She could hear movement inside, footsteps approaching with careful deliberation. Then the door opened, and there he was. Briggs looked different than he had in the city, cleaner somehow despite the rustic surroundings. His beard was trimmed shorter, and his eyes, those impossibly blue eyes, were calmer than she had ever seen them. He wore a simple flannel shirt and worn jeans, the uniform of a man who had traded leather and chrome for wool and wood. He stared at her like she was an apparition. Sutton, you left. The words came out harder than she intended, but she had earned the right to be angry, had earned the right to demand answers. Briggs stepped back, his shoulders slumping with guilt. I thought it was for the best. For whom Sutton pushed past him into the cabin, her eyes taking in the sparse but tidy interior. A small kitchen, a wood stove providing warmth, a bookshelf lined with paperbacks, a single bed in the corner, neatly made. For you, for me, for our daughter who cried herself to sleep asking where her daddy went, Briggs closed the door and leaned against it, unable to meet her eyes. I thought if I was gone, Langford would back off, would give you and Willa a chance to negotiate. You thought wrong. She turned to face him, arms crossed, her whole body vibrating with the force of her emotions. Do you know what Willa said to me after you left? She said, I hate you for making him go away. She blamed me, Memon. She thought I drove you off, just like everyone said I would. Sutton's voice cracked. I had to look into my daughter's eyes and see hatred there. Hatred for me. Because you decided to run instead of fight. Briggs flinched as if she had struck him. I did not mean to hurt her. I did not mean to hurt either of you. Then what did you mean to do? Because from where I am standing, all I see is a man who has been running his whole life, running from the club, running from his memories, running from the people who love him. She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. When does it stop, Briggs? When do you stop running? He was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as he struggled with emotions he had spent years bearing. I do not know how to stop. Then let me teach you. The words hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Sutton reached out and took his hand, feeling the familiar roughness of his palm against her skin. I did not come here to yell at you, she said, her voice softening. I came here to bring you home. I do not have a home. Yes, you do. She squeezed his hand. It is wherever Willa and I are. It has always been there waiting for you. You just have to stop running long enough to see it. Briggs looked at their joined hands, then at her face. Something was breaking open inside him. She could see it in the way his shoulders trembled, the way his breath came faster. There is something I have not told you, he said quietly. Something I remembered after I left. Sutton's heart clenched with fear. What is it? Briggs pulled away and walked to the window, staring out at the trees as if they held some answer he was searching for. The night I left, 5 years ago, his voice was rough with emotion. I remember all of it now. Not just pieces, everything. Tell me. He was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly dredged up from some deep place he had kept locked away. We were at your apartment. You were talking about the future, about how you had been feeling sick in the mornings, about how you thought maybe possibly you might be pregnant. He closed his eyes. You were so happy, so full of hope, and I was terrified. Why? Because I knew what I was, what I had done, Mama. He turned to face her, and she saw the pain etched into every line of his face. I had blood on my hands, Sutton. Things I did for the club that I can never take back. And I looked at you, this beautiful woman who deserves so much better, and I thought about a child growing inside you. My child. And I knew I could not let my past touch either of you. So you left. I told myself it was the only way. Briggs's voice broke. I told myself that you would move on. Find someone clean. Someone who could give you and the baby a real life. A safe life. Sutton felt tears sliding down her cheeks. You knew about the pregnancy before you left. Yes. The admission hit her like a physical blow. All these years she had assumed he had disappeared without knowing. Had told herself that if he had known about Willa, he would have stayed. But he had known. He had known, and he had left anyway. How could you, she whispered. How could you leave us knowing what we were losing because I loved you? The words were so simple, so devastating. I loved you too much to watch my past destroy you, Briggs continued. Too much to risk having you look at me one day with fear in your eyes when you learned what I had done. He shook his head slowly. So I disappeared. I thought it was the noble thing, the right thing, and I have spent 5 years paying for that choice. Paying how? By being alone. By wandering from place to place with no purpose, no direction, no reason to wake up in the morning. His eyes met hers. By punishing myself for a decision I made out of love, but that only caused pain. Sutton stood frozen, processing everything he had said. The anger she had felt was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Understanding, compassion, the recognition that love could make people do terrible, stupid, well-intentioned things. You should have told me, she said finally. You should have let me decide. I know. You should have trusted that our love was strong enough to survive whatever your past held. I know, in leaving again a few days ago. She shook her head. That was not protection. That was fear. I know, he stood before her stripped of defenses, his soul laid bare. The man who had terrified her with his disappearance, who had broken her heart twice, who had made her question everything she thought she knew about love and trust. And yet, she still loved him, still wanted him, still believed that somewhere beneath all the pain and misunderstanding and bad decisions, there was a life worth building together. What do we do now? She asked quietly. Briggs took a step toward her, then another, until they were standing close enough to touch. I want to come home, he said. I want to be Willa's father. I want to be your. He hesitated. Whatever you will let me be. I want to stop running and start living. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. But only if you want me to. Only if you can forgive me for everything I have put you through. Sutton looked up at him, seeing the hope and fear warring in his eyes. Forgiveness takes time, she said honestly. Trust takes even longer. I know, but I am willing to try, she continued. For Willa, for us, for the family we should have been 5 years ago. Briggs's breath caught. You mean it? I drove 7 hours to find you in a cabin in the middle of nowhere? She almost smiled. I think I mean it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But she did not pull away. Did not want to. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the afternoon light faded and the shadows grew long. Finally, Sutton pulled back and looked up at him. We should go, she said. Willa is waiting. Is she okay? She will be, once she sees you. Briggs nodded, something fierce and protective kindling in his eyes. Then let us go home. But first there was one more battle to fight. They drove back to the city together, Briggs following on his motorcycle, Sutton leading the way in her car. 7 hours of winding mountain roads, giving them both time to think about what came next. When they arrived at Opal's cottage late that night, Willa was already asleep. Sutton checked on her daughter, brushing a kiss across her forehead, whispering promises about tomorrow. The next morning, Langford's response to the divorce petition arrived by courier. He was contesting everything. Custody, assets, even the validity of the marriage itself. His lawyers had crafted a document designed to intimidate, to overwhelm, to make Sutton back down. But she was done being intimidated. I need to see him, she told Briggs over breakfast. Face to face. One last time, I am coming with you. No. Sutton shook her head. This is something I need to do alone. He started to protest, but she silenced him with a look. You are not my protector, Briggs. You are my partner. And right now, my partner needs to stay here and take care of our daughter while I handle this. The words "our daughter" made his expression soften. Okay, he agreed reluctantly, but if you are not back in 2 hours, I am coming after you. She smiled and kissed him gently. Fair enough. The apartment she had shared with Langford for 5 years looked different when she pulled into the driveway. Smaller somehow, less impressive. The carefully manicured lawn and the expensive cars and all the trappings of wealth seemed hollow now, like a stage set designed to impress, but lacking any real substance. Langford was waiting for her in the living room. He must have seen her car approaching because he was standing when she entered, his posture rigid with barely contained fury. You came to your senses, he said. Good. We can end this foolishness and get back to normal. I did not come to negotiate, Langford. Sutton stood in the doorway, refusing to step further into the space that had once been her home. I came to tell you in person what I will say in court. I am divorcing you. I am taking my daughter, and there is nothing you can do to stop me. Langford's face darkened. You think so? I have the best lawyers money can buy. I have connections in every courthouse in this state. I can make your life a living hell. Probably, Sutton agreed calmly. You have resources, power, influence, all the things you value so highly. So you understand why fighting me is pointless. No, I understand why fighting you is necessary. She stepped closer, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his eyes. Uncertainty. Fear. You paid to have Briggs removed from my life, she said quietly. You manipulated a vulnerable pregnant woman into marriage by playing the hero. You spent 5 years treating my daughter like an inconvenience rather than a child. She let the words land. And you thought I would never find out. Langford's composure cracked. Whatever you think you know. I know enough, and I have documentation. She held up the manila folder she had brought with her. Payments to the Iron Wolves. Timelines that match perfectly. Witnesses who are willing to talk. Those records are sealed. They were. Sutton smiled coldly. But you made enemies over the years, Langford. People who were happy to help me once they understood what I was looking for. She watched the realization dawn on his face. The understanding that she had done more than just find Briggs. She had built a case, had gathered evidence, had prepared for this moment with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her successful in business. This is blackmail, he said weakly. No, this is leverage. Sutton set the folder on the entry table. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to drop your custody claim. You are going to sign the divorce papers without contest. And you are going to us away from my daughter's life permanently. And if I refuse, then these documents go to your business partners, your clients, the newspapers. She shrugged. I imagine the story of how you paid a motorcycle gang to break up a young couple so you could swoop in and marry the pregnant woman would make quite headlines. Langford stared at her like he had never seen her before. Who are you? I am the woman you should have never underestimated. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Your lawyers will have the revised documents by end of business today. I suggest you sign them quickly. She looked back at him one last time. Goodbye, Langford. I wish I could say it was good knowing you. But we both know that would be a lie. She walked out without waiting for a response, leaving her old life behind forever. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Langford signed everything without contest, his lawyers silent and subdued. Whatever fight he might have wanted to put up had been extinguished by the evidence Sutton held over his head. He had too much to lose. Too many secrets that would destroy him if they came to light. In the end, he chose self-preservation over pride. Sutton got primary custody of Willa, full ownership of her own assets, and a clean break from 5 years of pretending. She walked out of the courthouse, feeling lighter than she had in years, the autumn sun warm on her face. Briggs was waiting for her on the courthouse steps. Willa's hand clasped firmly in his. Well, it is done. Willa broke free and ran to her mother, throwing her arms around Sutton's waist. Does this mean we can be a real family now? Sutton looked at Briggs over their daughter's head. His eyes held a question, a hope, a promise of something she had stopped believing in years ago. Yes, baby, she said, pulling Willa close. This means we can be a real family now. They did not return to the city. Instead, they drove north back to the small mountain town where Briggs had hidden, back to the cabin that had sheltered him during his lowest moments. But this time he was not running. This time he was coming home. The cabin needed work, more space for a family of 3, a proper bedroom for Willa, a kitchen big enough to cook real meals. But Briggs had skills and time, and for the first time in his life, something worth building for. They spent the autumn months transforming the small structure into a home. Briggs expanded the main room, adding windows that looked out over the mountain valley. Sutton set up a home office where she could continue her work remotely. Willa claimed the sunniest corner for her art supplies, covering the walls with drawings of butterflies and mountains and stick figures holding hands. The townspeople accepted them slowly, as small communities do. The waitress at the diner learned their usual orders. The owner of the general store kept Willa's favorite cereal in stock. The neighbors stopped by with casseroles and welcome baskets, curious about the family that had appeared in their midst. Briggs found work at a local garage, his mechanical skills valued in a place where the nearest dealership was hours away. Sutton discovered that her clients did not care where she lived as long as the work got done. And Willa enrolled in the small mountain school, making friends with children who had never seen a motorcycle gang member and did not know to be afraid. The past did not disappear. Briggs still had nightmares, sometimes memories of things he had done that woke him in the darkest hours. Sutton still caught herself looking over her shoulder occasionally, half expecting Langford to appear with lawyers and threats. And Willa still asked questions about why her daddy had been gone so long, questions that required careful, age-appropriate answers. But they faced it all together. That was the difference. That was everything. 6 months after they moved to the mountains, spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers. The meadow behind their cabin became a carpet of color, purple and yellow and white, stretching to the tree line. Birds returned from their winter migration, filling the air with songs that woke them each morning. Briggs had finished the birdhouse he and Willa started at Opal's cottage. It hung from a branch of the oak tree in their front yard, and every day Willa checked to see if any birds had moved in yet. This particular afternoon, she came running through the door with her face alight with joy. They came. Mommy, Daddy, come see. The birds came. They followed her outside, walking hand in hand through the soft spring air. Sure enough, a pair of bluebirds had taken up residence in the little house, their bright feathers flashing in the sunlight as they darted in and out. Briggs lifted Willa onto his shoulders so she could see better. She leaned forward, absolutely entranced, whispering so quietly that only her parents could hear. They are making it their home, just like we did. Sutton slipped her arm around Briggs's waist, leaning against his solid warmth. Just like we did. They stood together, watching the birds build their nest, a family united by persistence and love, and the refusal to give up on each other. The mountains rose around them, ancient and eternal guardians of the life they were creating. Later that evening, as the sun began its descent toward the peaks, they walked together along the path that wound through the meadow. Willa skipped ahead, stopping every few steps to examine an interesting flower or chase a butterfly. Her laughter echoed off the hillsides, pure and free. Briggs watched her with an expression of wonder that had not faded in all the months since they had been reunited. I still cannot believe she is real sometimes, he admitted quietly. That any of this is real. It is real, Sutton assured him. All of it. I wasted so much time running, hiding, thinking I was doing the right thing when I was just making everything worse. Sutton squeezed his hand. You are here now. That is what matters. But all those years, her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. He shook his head. I missed all of it. Then do not miss anything else. He looked at her. Really looked at her the way he had that first night in Opal's living room when recognition had sparked between them after 5 years apart. I love you, he said. I do not think I ever stopped. Even when I could not remember your name, something inside me remembered this. He placed his hand over his heart. Remembered you. Sutton felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, even when I was trying to forget you, even when I was building a life with someone else. Part of me was always waiting. For what? For this. She gestured at the mountains, the meadow, their daughter chasing butterflies in the golden light. For everything we were supposed to have. Willa came running back to them, her arms full of wildflowers she had gathered along the way. These are for our table, she announced. Daddy says flowers make a home smell nice. He is absolutely right. Sutton accepted the bouquet, bearing her nose in the fresh fragrance. When she looked up, Willa was standing between her parents, reaching up to take both their hands in hers. Can we keep walking? She asked. I want to see where the path goes. Briggs smiled down at her. I think that is a great idea. They continued along the winding trail, three figures silhouetted against the setting sun. The path climbed gradually, offering views of the valley below, the little town tucked into its fold, the ribbon of road that connected them to the wider world. At the top of the ridge, they paused to watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold and deepest purple. The mountains seemed to glow with an inner light, ancient sentinels standing watch over the land. Willa sat on a boulder, her legs swinging, her face tilted toward the sky. This is the best day ever, she said. The words echoed across the valley, simple and true, and full of the pure joy that only children can express without reservation. Sutton and Briggs exchanged a look over their daughter's head. No words were needed. They had traveled such a long road to reach this moment, had overcome abandonment and lies, memory loss and manipulation, fear and doubt, and the temptation to give up. But they were here now, together, a family, and that was enough. That was everything. As they walked back down the mountain, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Willa pointed out constellations she had learned from a book Briggs had given her, mixing up the names in ways that made her parents smile. That one is the Big Spoon, she declared confidently. The Big Dipper, Briggs corrected gently. That is what I said. Willa was undeterred. And that one is Orion's pants. Belt, baby. Orion's belt. Why would anyone want a belt in the sky? That is silly. Pants make more sense. Sutton laughed, the sound rising freely into the night air. It was the first time she had laughed like that in years. Really laughed without reservation or restraint. Briggs heard it and smiled, pulling her closer. I miss that sound, he murmured. What sound? Your laugh, he pressed a kiss to her temple. I could not remember it when I was lost, but I knew something was missing. Something important. And now I know it was this. It was you. They reached the cabin as the last light faded from the sky. Willa was tired, her earlier energy spent leaning heavily against her father's side as they climbed the porch steps. Briggs carried her inside and tucked her into bed, smoothing the hair back from her forehead the way he had learned to do over these months of finally being a father. I love you, Daddy, she murmured, already half asleep. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world. He stayed beside her until her breathing deepened into sleep, then quietly closed her bedroom door and joined Sutton on the porch. They sat together on the swing Briggs had built, wrapped in a blanket against the cool mountain air. The stars wheeled overhead, impossibly bright, this far from city lights. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, answered by another in the distance. No regrets, Briggs asked quietly. Sutton considered the question. The life she had left behind, the security she had sacrificed, the social standing she had walked away from, and all of it exchanged for a cabin in the mountains with a man who had twice disappeared from her life. None, she said, not a single one. Even after everything I put you through. Even after everything. She turned to look at him. This man who had appeared in her life like a storm and left wreckage in his wake. But storms could also clear the air, could wash away the old and make room for something new. I used to think love was about finding someone who would never hurt you, she said slowly. Someone safe, someone predictable, someone who would never leave. And now I think love is about finding someone worth hurting for. Someone worth the risk. Someone who makes the pain bearable because the joy outweighs it. Briggs pulled her closer, his arms strong and warm around her. I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you more joy than pain, he promised. I know. And she did know. Not because he was perfect, not because he would never make mistakes, but because she had seen him at his worst and watched him fight his way back. Because she knew the depth of his love, even when it expressed itself in terrible ways. Because she believed in the man he was becoming, not just the man he had been. The future stretched before them, unknown and full of possibility. There would be challenges ahead, arguments and misunderstandings, and moments when they would wonder if they had made the right choice. That was the nature of love, the nature of life. But they would face it together. That was the promise they had made, not in words but in actions, in the choice to stay, the choice to fight, the choice to build something new from the ashes of what had been. Inside the cabin, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds dream. Tomorrow she would wake them early, demanding pancakes and adventure. Tomorrow they would explore the mountain paths together, collecting rocks and feathers for Willa's growing collection. Tomorrow they would work on the vegetable garden Briggs was planning, teaching Willa how things grew from small seeds into something beautiful and sustaining. Tomorrow would bring whatever tomorrow brought. But tonight there was only this. Two people who had found their way back to each other against all odds. Two people who had chosen love over safety, truth over pretense, family over fear. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of flowers and possibility. Somewhere in the darkness, the owl called again, a sound of wildness and freedom that felt exactly right. Sutton rested her head against Briggs's shoulder and closed her eyes. She was home. They were all home. And that was the only story that mattered.